Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. I'm your host, Jamie Rich. And for those of you just joining us for the first time, welcome. Welcome. We're really glad to have you with us. What we're doing here in Rise and Shine Sundays is really just having a conversation about what's emerging in people's lives. This is not an opportunity. This is not a podcast. This is not how do I want to say this? This is not anything conventional that maybe you've watched. This is about a discussion where you get a chance to weigh in on a question because Rise and Shine Sundays is all about what's emerging. And how we do this every Sunday morning is we invite you to come in, take a listen with us where you can. And if you'd like to, in YouTube, in the comments, you can have some time to interact with the question that we're going to be posing for the week. And also, this will be happening fairly soon, I'm imagining, that you will actually be able to join us in the mix in this particular studio. So there's all sorts of options ahead. So I'm really excited. We are delighted to be here as part of the Breakthrough Show Network. And I can see some people already arriving in the chat and sending them some uh, sending us some good wishes. So let's begin with where we always begin on Rise and Shine Sundays, and that is with an inquiry. Part of the joy of life is being able to sort of address what's coming at us with a sense of inquiry, right? So we build Rise and Shine Sundays around that central inquiry. And that's where we extend an invitation for you to join us in this conversation. Again, we're not here to provide you with answers. We're here to sort of hold the discussion to see what emerges around this particular inquiry. This week, we've been focusing a lot at the beginning of the year. There's all this pressure to start over and to do things and to really focus on, if you will, building a foundation forward without really examining what we've been through. So in the past couple of episodes, we've been looking about the correct closing sequence. And one of the things that is true for a lot of people, especially creative people, so those of you who consider yourself to be creative or empaths or people who approach the world with a fresh set of eyes and imagination, this is a particularly good question for you to take a look at. And that is, what is it costing you to hold on to every option, right? We live in a world that celebrates possibilities. I myself like to push myself. I like to say that I am a possibility thinker, right? But we're told to keep our options open, to stay flexible, to never close the doors on anything. But what if trying to hold on to every option is actually costing us something, right? So this week we're asking, what is it costing you to hold on to every option? And not theoretically, we really want you to kind of answer that question is what it feels like in your body, right? Your your energy, your ability to move forward. All right. So as we begin to move through this hour, we're going to be incorporating some interesting questions and some interesting ideas. And here to kind of help me incorporate some of those ideas is my good friend Ray Guillot. Where I understand this morning there's a blizzard going on in your world, right?
Oh, it's a near blizzard. It's not officially a blizzard unless it's heavy winds for 3 hours and continuous snow for at least 3 hours.
Wow. Okay. Well, now that we have the definition, so for all of you who have been who have been tuning in for information and facts, we now know what the definition of a blizzard is, right? But really, we would like to talk, and we'll be looking forward to bringing in some of your comments in the chat. I know that there's a lot of creative people out there, right? And you know, when we raise this topic about what is it costing you to hold on to every option, right? Um, oh. And we're getting further weather reports. I guess I should probably, it seems that they're getting a lot of snow in Connecticut too. So everybody, this is the perfect sort of winter discussion. So maybe get yourself a cup of cocoa as we kind of begin to have this conversation. But essentially, as we're looking at our central question, what is it costing you to hold on to every option? It's another one of those questions that really wants you to take a look at the pressure. We talked about the pressure that comes from the outside, but this is a lot of the pressure that you put on yourselves because now you're holding on to all of these possibilities. And while it's wonderful to be able to open yourself up to possibilities, one of the things that when you talk to creative people is that they're actually holding on to every one of these ideas. And the cost of hanging on to all of these ideas leads to that creative paralysis. So, Ray, I know we talked a little bit about this before we got started this morning. Do you have any opening thoughts as we begin this discussion?
Nothing specific yet, but what I find interesting is the topic itself has actually been explored by production people, cognitive scientists, to look at what is really happening in the brain
Mm-hmm.
when we either make a decision or not make a decision or have too many choices. So I'll leave it at that, and we can loop back to that as you move in the discussion.
Yeah, yeah. And again, if you have some comments or thoughts, especially about what something that, if there's a choice that you've been wanting to make, or you feel like you've got 15 choices to make, right? Um, this is what we're talking about, right? Because we're supposed to research everything, right? That's what we're taught. You want to, like, I'm going to hold on to all of these options. I'm going to consider all the angles. I'm going to maintain every relationship, pursue every opportunity. And the other message that we get is that narrowing down means limiting ourselves. That if somehow we have all of these possibilities, and again, I say this as somebody who likes to dwell in possibility, the cost of that, of just always staying in that dwelling state and always embracing every possibility, kind of leaves you kind of stuck outside of making a decision, right? Because we then don't want to move forward because we don't want to limit ourselves, right? And um, there's someone who's kind of putting this in the chat, right? And I love what Jessica has to say about this. Let me see if I can. It's interesting to think about how harmonizing my life between removing myself from binary thinking and not overwhelming myself with all the possibilities, right? That's that tension point, right? Um, and the harmony comes really from understanding that it's not about holding on to all these possibilities, because that's why I was asking you in the very beginning to think about the things that you're holding on to, right? And then afraid to do anything with, you're out of that harmony state already. Thoughts about that, Ray?
Yeah, one of the interesting things is I like to go from the conceptual to the practical and bounce
Sure.
around a little bit.
Totally.
Um, I'll just mention something that I looked into a few years ago, and I'm sure a lot of people will relate. If you're working in any kind of work where you have to meet a deadline or you have to make a decision somewhere along the way, is the idea of closing loops. Now, this originated from GTD thinking, getting things done, where his research indicated that if you have too many things floating in your brain, you get confused. So he looked at, okay, so recognize that, and I think you're going to touch on that in a little bit, recognize what's going on, then look at a flow of what you wanted to achieve. Because the brain gets confused easily that if you don't close a loop, closing a loop essentially means determining what you want to do now,
Mm-hmm.
in the near future, and maybe the longer term.
Right.
So I refer to that as contextual thinking, in the sense that it doesn't have to be, as Jessica has indicated, it doesn't have to be binary, a yes or a no. It can be, I'm considering it, but not now.
Right.
And I think you've mentioned that in previous
Right.
discussions.
I've talked about that's one of the things with possibilities is to recognize that you can actually kind of triage your possibilities to be able to say yes, no, and not now. Not now is a really powerful thing for creative people to, allow themselves to have that back burner because as a good chef you can focus on what you're cooking and you can see things simmering back there, but again it's using that agency to sort of decide how you're going to navigate through the different, you can't possibly manage that many pots, with your focus. Something that Ali put in the chat here: it costs me the present time that I waste um, when I mud myself in a past that I cannot change and a gazillion future hypotheses that might never occur in present time. And that is that felt sense within inside your body. That's when you realize that not only are you're not just dwelling in possibilities, but you've literally gotten yourself out of the embodiment of what's possible, right? Because you you can't even get that felt sense back. And building on this, he says confusion is blocking us. Yet we learn that confusion means growth. And so he actually is asking us a question. And so thank you very much, Ali, because, I adore questions. That's what we're here for, right? The one thing that AI can never take away from us is our ability to inquire about things and our ways to explore and experiment. So to your question, I think that the confusion begins to show you that there isn't that ability. You have not, you're so worried about holding on to the possibilities, right? That it is confusing. That clarity can't emerge because there's a difference between the creative process and putting things together and just confusion. Confusion is static, right? It's a fixed state where I'm just confused. I don't know what to do. Whereas the creative process of trying things out, experimenting, is being able to do what I was talking to you earlier. It's being able to kind of go into motion and say, well, let me test this thing out. And if this idea works, this one doesn't, what is being called out. And I have a really good friend. This may throw a little bit too much woo-woo into the conversation, but sometimes you want to talk to your ideas that you've got in front and ask which one wants to emerge, right? It's it is really fascinating sometimes when we stay in that paralysis, because modernity teaches us that we have to make a decision, pick one, do something, have results, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the confusion that he's talking about comes from that there's a solution up here that I've got to have it all figured out before I even begin to experiment with it, right?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting aspect that I think Ollie is referring to, is that if confusion is a state and a process, because if you use it effectively to understand what is going on, so there's a level of awareness there, and it's also a process. So how do you deconfuse?
I just had to kind of breathe into that one. So I think everybody has maybe this is a thing to kind of bring into the chat even as we're speaking now. How do you deconfuse? I love that. We just invented a new word, right? We know about clarity, right? But in the process of gaining clarity is that sort of deconfusion, the dust settling around all of these options that we're holding on. So really what you can kind of say is if I've got 15 ideas that I really want to see and get launched in 2025, right? And if I stay in the fact that I'm not able to survive, or not able to survive, not able to decide, right? That's where my mind locks in. That's where that confusion comes in, because you're still looking for that, as Jessica said earlier, that binary answer, right? That it either, that I'm going to have to pick one, right? As opposed to being able to allow yourself to sort of see what emerges when you look at these different ideas and recognize the power of the decision is also about letting go of what you're holding on to, right? So the deconfusion comes from being able to just kind of take a breath and then see which ones, again, like I said, sometimes asking each one of those possibilities, which one of them wants to emerge, what that felt sense is in your body. Is it yes, no, or not now? Where does that come from inside yourself? There's all sorts of little tricks and strategies. And if people have some ideas in the chat that they want to share about how they deconfuse themselves, we're open to that. Anything else that's coming up for you, Ray?
Well, I kind of want to loop back to the idea of the triage principle.
Okay.
Because in creativity, what's interesting, one of the techniques in creativity is blending, is to combine ideas in unforeseen or unanticipated or maybe even ideas that you would never blend together, like opposites,
Right.
because maybe a portion of an idea combined with another portion of an idea creates something completely new. So I think what that does, it guides the brain into saying something is happening here, a decision has been made. So in essence, it's not a binary thing. It's this element of an idea can be possibly parked somewhere for
Mm-hmm.
further consideration. So I think it's all the elements that have been shared so far and that you've mentioned, Jamie, is that it's never a binary process, or shouldn't be. If it is, why does it have to be that rigid?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. If you're just now joining us on this edition of Rise and Shine Sundays, we're talking about what is it costing you to hold on to every option, which is something that every creative person struggles with, seems to be on a regular basis, and something that a lot of us struggle with, especially at this time of year. So we're looking at some of the questions that people are saying. And again, here's a wonderful bit of feedback for us. Some people, Jessica included, want to write down all those possibilities so that they don't have to live in their brain, right? I think, again, that's a wonderful example of deconfusing, right? Because if you find yourself in that confusion, sometimes it's a locked mental state, right? And so what Jessica is kind of revealing to us is her process is she releases herself from that confusion. She doesn't want to hold on to those ideas. She puts them in a place where she can pick them up at her convenience, right? And that gets that taxing part of it, of holding on to possibilities, because we struggled with the right word for this particular question, right? Because I don't want to ever think that, for creative people especially, that there's anything wrong with the power of their imagination. Your ability to have a bazillion different ideas is not something that should be, um, I want to say, mocked or shamed or ridiculed. Some people are highly creative. Some people are highly visual. Ideas flow through them naturally, and there's this ability that because all of these ideas come at them, it's like, well, wait, well, how do I choose? How do I do? And then they stay locked in that confusion. So Jessica's tangible strategy for herself is to write them down. I do a little exercise when I have a lot of ideas running through my head. I try to ask myself, who does this belong to? Who does this idea belong to? Because oftentimes when I'm in the presence of people, and I don't know if this is true for other people, and please, give us some comments in the chat, I can pick up ideas because I'm in the presence of someone who is very creative or gives me that sort of energy, right? And especially when, if we get four people around and we're thinking about all the possibilities or what are ahead, it's a wonderful generative sort of energy to be a part of, right? And then I have to remind myself, as that idea is flowing through, wait, who does this belong to? Oh, okay, this was just a little temporary dance with an idea, right? But applying that yes, no, and not now. One of the things I love about, again, Jessica's idea of putting things down on paper and then storing them, so that she doesn't store them in their brain. I've given myself, because I don't do that good of a job about writing stuff down. Those of you who know me that know that I sometimes have note cards around just to write things down. But for me, it's that permission slip inside my head to step away from holding on and being confused by saying, well, you know what? I don't need to entertain that idea. I don't need to, but so not now is the permission slip to, if you will, put that back in my quiver of arrows that I can draw on.
I really like that, and what Jessica and both and you, Jamie, as well, is what you've actually done is you've begun the exploration stage of looking at what the possibilities. So, yeah, Jessica has given one of the recommendations from the model of getting things done is to declutter your brain,
Mm-hmm.
but give access to the ideas. So you're not losing them, which the brain worries about. You're putting them in a place they can be retrieved, a trusted space, a
Mm-hmm.
card or a notebook or whatever. And what's fascinating is that's an accepted practice, and now it's moving into the age of artificial intelligence, AI.
Mm-hmm.
Is what's fun is you can then take those ideas that have been retrieved and throw them into the blender
Right.
uh, to ask further questions, continue the exploration. And as you've mentioned before, is okay, so to go from thinking and creating ideas or considering options is then go into experimentation, is putting them into action or bringing them to life. And both of you have touched on not just by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
with others.
Mm-hmm. I do want to, beautifully said, Ray. I do want to go back to something Ollie just brought up, which was, yes, struggling is part of the human experience. There are 88 keys on a piano, last time I checked, right? And music comes from all of them. And um, sadly, the level is not the same. Some struggle for survival in war zones, others because they realize they have no more sugar to put with their coffee. But yes, there is that essential struggle, right? And so, what I'm saying about when you have all of these options, right? That the idea that you have all of these options, what is it costing you to hold on to every option? The idea is you want to be able to keep dreams alive, but when you're holding on to them so tightly, right, and trying to force some kind of a decision, you're adding to the struggle, right? And I think that that's part of the difference that we're talking about. We recognize that emergence, has to come out of something, right? And I'm going to sound biblical here. We know the seed has to kind of push through the soil, right? So there is that natural struggle, right? But that struggle is made easier when you shift from emergence and when you recognize that so much of it is your conditioning of what you've been told you need to hang on to. You know, um, that's what sits there. Um, Jessica also had this question, which I think is really good. I would love to know how you determine if an idea belongs to someone else or not. And for me, it's about when you're around really creative people, right? Whoop. I just saw this. By the way, I'm not implying that I have always known where those notes are. So, but what what I think is important about the idea is that when you're in the presence of really strong ideas, right, there is something that kind of emerges out of that. And so when I when I recognize that I'm in a collective idea exchange as opposed to an individual idea exchange, oftentimes our ideas are about what we want to do. And then oftentimes there are ideas that we'd like to see emerging in relationship to other people, right? So it's real easy for me to sometimes say, who does this belong to when maybe it's not meant for me to carry it on at this particular point in time, right? That's that same yes, no, not now filter, correct? So, if you have other thoughts, Ray, as things are,
Yeah, I think that's a one of those questions and approaches that is deeper than it initially sounds. What I
Mhm.
think is interesting is when you say, who does this belong to? is when you're in discussion, somebody will say, "Hey, Jamie, I think you need to do this," or uh, and you go like, "Well, who's that really for?" In the sense that, or do you need to own that, or do you need that to be explored as a co-creative process? Because it's very easy for everyone, and I think in our existing system where it's about performance and productivity, somebody always keeps adding stuff to your plate,
Right.
so to speak. And I have a poster in the office here that basically says, um, just because somebody suggests something, it doesn't become your priority. Or you don't have to do it just because somebody else told you to do it.
Hmm.
So it in essence is a corollary or an
Hmm.
extension of, I love the exploration, is who does this really belong to? This is great, but I can't do it now. Maybe we can explore that together later. So I think it's a good dynamic because it basically doesn't trap you.
Right. Right. And it also realizes that, again, all of that forced creativity is just very, very detrimental. The there is a power really when, what becomes possible when you accept that you can't do everything, right? And that's part of that conversation that you have with yourself, right? You recognize other people are imposing priorities on you, and you just have to get very clear on it. Going back to Ollie's question from before, it's part of the struggle, right? But if you also ask the question correctly, you begin to say, well, wait, what is this cost for me holding on to this? Because if I'm holding on to something, something else cannot emerge. And usually what can emerge is when, I'm going to try this and see what happens. I'm going to give myself the permission to follow through with some of my ideas. Um, I want to see if there's anything. Um,
Lots of interesting feedback, Jimmy.
yeah, 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 yeah. So again, you don't want to. I feel like I may want to do this. We wanted to try something new this week, and so we've got some visuals that we want to be able to kind of share with you. And the visuals we want to kind of that will kind of, if you will, foster some more questions to see what kind of emerges. Um, and so let's take a look at these. All right, shall we? Let's go into this. Right. So
Yeah, and the visuals aren't meant to tell you.
yeah,
They're meant to prompt you
right,
to start thinking or exploring,
right.
and enhance what you've already contributed in the chat area.
Right. It's great to see some new people showing up in the chat. So we're going to switch to this, right? We're going to talk about the cost of maybe. I love that. The cost of why keeping your options open is actually keeping you stuck. Modernity really wants us to see that if we choose something, we're giving up something else, right? There's a term that I've used quite a bit, and it happens with creative people. There's the wonderful thing to be able to say I'm full of ideas, and then there's this other thing that I can't let go of any of my precious ideas. I get involved in something that I call worry, clutch, and grab. I've got to hold on to it because I don't want to let go of it, because if I let go of it, it'll go away. I'll lose it. I won't have it for later. It won't be available to me. So I stay constantly holding on to these options. And that is the cost of maybe. Um, so,
Ollie contributed an interesting thing, is these are seeds for the participants to water. I love it.
yes. So what we're about to share kind of visually are some of those seeds. So thank you, Ollie. Um, So one of the challenges, and this is the other challenge of doing things live, right? We're moving stuff around as if we're in a Go Brunch room. Um, the nice thing is that you're not standing in a room, you're standing in a hallway, right? You're not getting anywhere, right? So if you're staying open to all these possibilities, you're really just in this long hallway, right? You're not actually moving, you're just maintaining the idea that you could go anywhere, which is fine if you're in neutral. But oftentimes, the people in a hallway aren't in a state of neutrality going, oh, there's doors around me. They're going, oh my God, there's doors around me. Where the heck am I supposed to go right now? Again, that pressure is there. You're not in the room, you're standing in the hallway, and you're trying to stay open to all of these different possibilities, right?
Yeah, the interesting, I think Jessica also made an interesting comment, is what we're doing here and what we hope to do throughout the series and throughout the engagements is playing with metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
Because metaphors are cognitive tools that assist language because they visualize a situation that is complicated and allows others to jump in. We'll do a session on metaphors one of these days because metaphors are very powerful, but they can also break.
They can. They can. And, you know, as we learned last week and in some of the past episodes, you know, we can throw a word in there like, you know, what is it costing? You know, we could have a whole hour about what those costs are. And that's sort of where we're focused, right? Because the other thing that we begin to realize is that unlimited possibility oftentimes leads to zero output, right? You know, all these ideas, you have this creative problem, you know, so you end up with zero finished products, right? So you never really create anything. And again, that inability to be able to do what you would like to do to bring into you creates another layer that you don't want to have to um, live with either. So now you're confused and you've disappointed the person that hopefully you love the most, which is yourself, because you haven't been able to choose, right? And even though I'm the last person on the earth who would try to say that everything in life is about an output, I will tell you that you don't even get that satisfaction, that sense of success, that ability to be able to see that what you've spoken into the world, you know, wasn't received. That's that zero output. It's not that you just didn't do something, right? It's that there's been, you haven't had that sense of emergence to, ah, there it is. So this is a little bit for those of you who are left brain thinkers, right? You know, some of the things that you lose, which is, you know, what is it costing to hold on to every option? You know, you lose a lot of energy. You can lose a lot of sleep. I don't know. Sometimes maybe I'm the only person in the world whose ideas have kind of woken me up, you know, with, um, I mean, I have solved the traffic pattern in my neighborhood so many times at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing. Um, but these are two of the other costs that we don't talk about a lot, which is the momentum. So you're again back to that inability to move forward in any direction, and it becomes a pattern, right? If I'm presented with too many options, it just confuses me, right? And then we have that depth. You know, you're always standing outside in the hallway, unable to commit to anything deeply.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that's an offshoot of this as well, is if carried too far, you can be the state of paralysis that you've referred to, Jamie, can become an ongoing behavior, procrastination. And procrastination is essentially avoiding making a decision. But what they've determined or what they found with procrastination is a decision. It's a
Hmm.
decision to do nothing.
Right,
But we
right.
don't understand what you're touching on here, which I love, the balance sheet of indecision, is that there is um, an impact,
Hmm.
there is a result, maybe not the result you want, but
Right.
there is a result of not doing anything. Is And you don't have to look too far, just read the headlines. Is that
Correct.
if something isn't done, um, like if you don't plow the streets, there are car accidents in snowbound countries. But you,
Well, and again, one of the things that's really true is we're having this conversation without blame or judgment. You know, it's really just to simply to ask the question. This isn't somebody standing you with a pointed finger, waving in your face, going, "What is it costing you to hang on to every option?" It's just that simple, gentle inquiry that says, "Hey, what is it costing you right now to hang on to every option?" I want to do something joyful in the moment, just because one of the things that emerges in creativity is that, I had no idea that anybody would take this and turn it into an acronym, right? But energy, sleep, momentum, and depth, the things that are there, that's meds, right? So thank you, Ollie. But conversely, what does deep or far mean in this context, right? Um, and I think that part of that is that the depth of the indecision becomes really, really hard to struggle out of. So it's some of those decisions were as simple as, what do you want to have for dinner, right? But when you get in there, and any of us who have been creative people who have found the depression that can come from not being able to follow through with it, know that depth, that sadness, that thing that sort of compresses and contracts us, that's the depth that we're talking about here. um, so I'm going to go back to this. We talked a little bit about this earlier. And that is the difference between staying open, which I think is a wonderful thing in the world, right? And clutching, right? So literally, this is how the body experiences this cost of holding on to every option, right? You can be open to possibility, but not hang on to every possibility. And I just want to see sort of how this can kind of breathe it in a little bit here, where we have staying open allows that movement. You respond to what emerges, you adapt and pivot, and you stay in that sense of readiness, right? And the readiness that comes from being able to say yes, no, not now, right? Whereas if we're clutching onto it, it stops that movement, right? The you're not going to turn your back on any idea that you've come up with. You're focused on all of those options, and there's a lot to ask in that moment, right? Thoughts on this, Ray?
Yeah, Jessica's reacting to the word pivot, and which got me thinking in the sense of being able to pivot at the right time. And it's all that process of going back and forth. Now, no, maybe later, or why is a pivot necessary? So, it's not an endless cycle. It's a period of examination and decision to move forward, to move somewhere.
Right. So those of you who are, again, this is a little bit of a left brain visual for those of you who are left brained and because if we're going to be talking about creativity and flow, why not have a little flow chart, right? That kind of guides us. And are you holding this consciously? That's the other part of it. We can hold on to an awful lot of material, and not know that we're doing it consciously. And this again is that inquiry process. I'm holding on to multiple options. Is it because I have a genuine transformation fade and need to discern my path? That's a conscious choice, right? It's because I'm afraid to let go or make the wrong decision. Oftentimes that you'll go through that sort of fear choices. I'm not for sure exactly what I'm going to do, but I got to do something. They tell me I've got to do something. So I've got to make up my mind. I've got to decide. And then you're just in that fear-based stagnation again. So let's move off this slide or
Sure.
this particular visual, if I may.
This is what we
Um,
would call in the old days a text intensive visual.
that's right. That's right. And we'll hop off this next second because this is one of my one of the things that emerged for me when we were discussing the topic for this particular week. What if limitation is not lost? Limitation is relief. What becomes possible when you accept you can't do everything? You're honoring your actual capacity, and that's not a weakness. It's a strategy. It's accepting I can't maintain all of this, and that gives us the focus to do some things really well instead of doing everything poorly. There's a lot in that. These visuals are really helpful for me sometimes because they actually, like you said, further that inquiry. Um, and I think one of the challenges as we are going through this is to recognize that there is this wonderful freedom that comes when you're able to make choices because you can give them your full energy and attention. And you have the right to again go through the inquiry process to see if this is the idea that it needs to hang on to. This isn't, you know, uh, I don't know how many times people have, this is again conditioning that we received. Well, you had that idea, you better stick to it. You got to see this idea through to the end,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm going to choke this sucker for everything that he, I get the felt sense that that's not right, but I made this choice, and gosh darn it, you stick to it. And there's somebody else that knows. Again, we have all of these really bad parenting, bad messages that we picked up that says even if we do have an idea that we choose to pursue, that now there's, a path forward that says you must dedicate every ounce of energy to that idea. And again, if you can switch from your head to your body, what is the cost of holding on to that idea? And again, I think of that clenched hand, open hand again. If I could go back to that visual, I would, but I didn't get that certification to make that happen yet. That's a possibility for later. Um, yeah, this is really true. You know, your body sure will tell you. Um, and I think that's you. Um, I use a sense of light and heavy when it comes to certain ideas. Um, I had the opportunity for this year, I'll share a little personal story for myself, um, to do some programming at a place where I've done programming for a long time. And they wanted me to come back and do, imagine this, they wanted me to do some programming for old people. What, what was the likelihood of that? But every time that I would think about that idea, it got heavy. And there's a tendency sometimes when we've got ideas, there's that tension between, am I afraid of this? It's something new and it's unknown. Or is this the really felt sense that this just isn't right for me? Yes, no,
Mhm.
and not now.
Yeah.
And every time I return to that idea, that tension would appear. And knowing what's right, again, goes back to that open hand versus a clenched fist, right? And for some people, that's this as a metaphor, open hand, clenched fist. For other people, it's the sense of light and heavy. This is a way in which you can run these things through your body to sort of see where that energy is running. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think that's a great way to describe it, and I'll just make an observation based on what you've just said, Jamie, as well as what we're hearing and seeing in the chat. Is everyone is bringing forward ideas and nuances to the topics or to the elements of the topic. So what's exciting is nothing is an absolute when the use of visuals or text or prompts or metaphors, everyone is exploring them and sharing their understanding as well as their reaction. And
Right,
you're talking about body reaction that we've now basically incorporated in the discussion, even as a level of understanding
right,
and processing what's happening in any given moment or a
right,
situation where a decision is either made or not made or delayed.
right. Again, where there's no joy, just say no. The body knows, right? Beautifully said, Ollie. And I think the challenge is particularly unique the older that you get, because um, in the back of the mind of many people who are my age, there's a time clock going. Well, I don't have much time left, so I've got to choose wisely. Um, Similarly, it seems like only 10 minutes ago, I was the young person that was trying to figure out what the ideas were that I could, begin to devote a life to. But again, that same energy is there, whether or not you're 107 or 27, is um, that ability to recognize there is a way in which you can run the ideas of your creative ideas and your options through your own sense of self verification, whatever's best for you. but you don't run from the inquiry, right? And you recognize that it is about determining what's best for you based on that felt sense, right? So, um, as we kind of go back to that central question of what is it costing you to hold on to every option, right? The thing that beautifully emerges for you from that inquiry is the limitation, right? Is the limitation of being able to kind of choose consciously, and to choose consciously every time you need to make that decision, and to give yourself that permission slip, right? So, um, I want to address a little bit of a comment, that comes up, especially for people that are my age and older. I don't have much time left, right? I don't have every possibility open to me. This is true. Not every possibility is open to you, but that's not a bad thing. What possibilities are around you? What can you choose? A lot of people, some people know this, some people don't. One time I weighed 315 pounds when I was in my early 40s. And I remember a friend of mine sat down with me. She hadn't seen me in a long time. And she said, I want to know everything about what that process was like for you. What are you not eating? And I was just like, I hadn't given that much thought because I had been through so many things that told me what I should do, right? They gave me, diets and prescriptions or whatever, but I found a way of eating that really worked well for me. So I had all these possibilities in front of me, and I got such joy from choosing what I got to eat. And I actually, in that moment, realized that I'd gotten out of that creative paralysis of, oh, I'll make a mistake. I got to do this right. I've got to do everything. I knew that there were all these possibilities for me, and I found the joy in choosing, right? So the joy doesn't come from holding on, protecting, doing everything we can possibly to keep that back. The joy comes from, choosing what works best for you and choosing that again and again and again.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Jamie. I think what's also appeared in the chat as well is it's never really binary. It's
Hmm.
both sometimes at the same time, and sometimes very very close together. Is sort of letting go and letting come. So that they're connected. They're not separate. That's the connections that we sometimes don't see
Say
or
that
feel.
again. Say
Uh,
that again. Letting go.
let it go to let come.
Right.
Because you have to there again is apparently in cognitive science, you have to clear space because the brain is a very efficient device. And actually the scientist coined it as the brain is a miser. It
Hmm.
doesn't want to have a lot of storage in it so that it can access stuff very quickly. So it's like a hard drive. You
Right.
fill it up, it takes longer to access.
Right. So again, the harm comes sometimes when you feel like you have no choice, right? You have no other choice but to make a choice that you don't want to make this particular choice. And I get it. Sometimes there are things that you have to do that don't bring a lot of joy, right? But you can also choose to shift into neutral to make those decisions to and again, I'm probably the world's worst person to be mentioning Buddhism at this particular point in time, but the idea of being able to shift into a neutral state of mind to see what emerges in situations that are really tense, tight, and uncertain. you know Sometimes we just have to be the witness, right? And sometimes we have to be that witness to our own creative possibilities, because we then can't see, because we're so busy holding on to all of the possibilities, and or I've got to be able to do this, I got to be able to do that, all of the other constructs that we've got. And if I can just give myself that sense to go from this to this and see what emerges. Yes. uh, and again, joy rules supreme. Since we began this conversation with a discussion of the fact that Ray is in a blizzard and that it's snowing where some of our other watchers are right now, let it go, let it come, let it snow, right? Um, The very popular, old man, yells at cloud, right? Um, and we have to be able to kind of flip it to be able to find that joy in choice, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting thought that came to mind as well, and it's in previous discussions we've had about we live in complex times. We live in times of uncertainty. We live in times of things that have never ever happened before are happening.
Hmm.
So now we need to develop new capacities. And one of the capacities I think we've touched on today is the capacity to let go.
Hmm.
Is they don't really teach you that anywhere. And I think other than what you shared and what others have shared in the chat, is life teaches you
Hmm.
things. We may not label it as a capacity, but in essence, it's a learned experience or something learned that we've explored or processed. Um, I'll share a Marie Kondo moment.
Sure.
Is when clutter, right?
Hmm.
And how do you actually declutter a home? Um, Without going into the details, what resonated with me was a ritual she formed, is saying letting she recognized letting go is very, very difficult. So the ritual was to take an object, a dress, a shirt, um, some knickknack or whatever, but to thank it
Hmm.
for what the joy that it brought to you
Hmm.
so that you can say goodbye.
Hmm.
And that's a capacity that we need to process for a lot of things, for ideas, is that it brought me joy. It allowed me to move forward to something else, thank you, and to either pursue it or to say it had value.
Right. And that example that you gave is that it's the logger jam. Right. It's the permission slip. The thanking releases that energy so that you can get into movement. Right. I used to have a friend who was helping a person who had gone through a divorce, had dealt with manic depression in his life, and was having an inability to be able to sort through the things that he needed to carry forward. Right. Because he wasn't, like, do I need this? Will I need this? I don't know. I don't know where my life is going. And she literally put three rooms in the house. Yes, no, and I don't know yet, right? And so she would stand in front of him and said, "Is this is a yes or a no or what?" And she literally, this, again, this is many years ago when we all had the ability to lift stuff into a different room. But what that allowed is for that movement, that emergence to take place, right? Because it's about oftentimes the pressure to be creative, and to make the right decision, all of those things locks us into a confused state of this where we can't let go, right? And we have all this conditioning that tells us, like you just said, that no one teaches us how to let go. They say it makes us, and let go can be really sort of scary. But what we've tried to embrace in this particular hour is that conscious choice allows you to sort of curate what you're doing in the present moment, right? And to be able to bless it for what it's been able to provide you if it's something tangible. But there are all sorts of really good methods that are about getting that movement restored, right? And it's about finding what works best for you. So if that's taking some ideas and liberating yourself from the confused thought of holding all of that and writing it down on paper, if it's questioning, if it's journaling, right? Um, Somebody had said, um, and again, I love it when joy emerged. Marie taught me to throw away that which doesn't bring me joy, so I'd like to throw away my bills, right? Um,
Some
and
exceptions may apply.
Well, and the joy of that is, again, you take the power over something that is really super, super heavy, and you apply a layer of joy because it's your choice. It's what you bring to that energy. And sometimes just being able to experience that shift is really what's important, because in truth, you cannot make a wrong decision if it's a conscious choice that you've made, right? And it's okay that in the concepts that we talk about all the time here on Sunday mornings, and we're delighted that so many of you are joining us, both not only in the live broadcast, but also in watching some of our episodes, that we get that opportunity to ask ourselves because it's through the inquiry. I can sit here and tell you, here are the 6 steps for overcoming whatever, but that's not, you're going to then just pick up somebody else's 6 steps, right? What emerges within you when we ask a question, right? And so that's what we're here for every Sunday morning. So, do we have any final thoughts as we wrap up our time together?
Just a lot of joy from this end. Is the I just find it amazing is pick a topic and share it, and uh, just the exploration, the inquiry, the thinking, that brings me joy.
Yeah. And in honor of Ray, we have everything is very profound for our resilience that we're experiencing, and so that's why, again, you bring to these moments, and we're so grateful to see what happens. We're so grateful to the Jessica and the Breakthrough Show Network for allowing us to host this. Weekly opportunity to inquire on questions. If you have ideas that you would like for us to explore in future chats, or if you want us to embrace a certain concept, we're very open to that. You can reach us at, we now have a wonderful website where you can just go to. It's so wonderful. It just does 2 basic things right now. It says, here's our website, here's when we're on, and here's how you can reach us. But
Please
if you go
click.
to riseandshinesundays.com, you'll get the weekly reminder of when our show is on. And you'll also have the opportunity to email us and let us know how we're doing and how you're reacting. So we are very grateful for this opportunity. And we will say back at you. You brought me a lot of joy this morning. The timing of the topic was profound in itself, right? So let's see what continues to emerge in 2026. We're here every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the live conversation, and you have a ways to meet, connect with us. Any other things from you, Ray?
I was going to say, if you get tired of looking at Ray, please volunteer.
Yes. Um,
I would love to have somebody else replace or supplement this. So that's one of the experiments we're wanting to do, is to
yeah,
have multiple exchanges live
right.
with the chat as well.
And I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to, there may be a wave ahead for us that will allow us to add some extra ripples in what we're doing moving forward, of being able to include people in a discussion. So, coming up next on the Breakthrough Show Network is Spirit Sundays. Again, you'll know where to find us. It's always a pleasure for everyone to be here for the inquiry. My thanks to you, Ray. My thanks to everyone who was in the chat. Again, keep us in contact, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday at this time.